Greetings and good evening, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us tonight for this special Wisdom Wednesday. If you haven't already given a shout out to let us know that you're here, where you're from, make sure you take a moment to do this. My name is Atlantis, and I will be sitting in for our dear sister Ajwa, who is the Wisdom Wednesday coordinator. She'll be joining us later on this evening. So to keep with the tradition, I do want to take a moment to see who we have joining us this evening and shout you all out. We tend to have a large family turning out from all over the country and all over the world. So I see we have some brothers and sisters in the house from the DC area, from Inglewood, California, Chicago, New York City, Georgia, Maryland, Hayward, California, Philly is in the house, Stockton, California, Pasadena. Okay, West Coast is representing tonight. So thank you all again for being here this evening. You all are in store for a special presentation by one of my favorite Jegnas, my father, Anthony Browder. So this evening, we will be celebrating 40 years. Can you all believe it? 4 decades of IKG, liberating the minds and souls of our wonderful people. So it is my pleasure to be here with you all this evening. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to invite my father to come on camera and get this show started. All right.
Thank you, Atlantis. Thank you so much for stepping in and filling in for our dear sister Adra, who will be joining us a little later this evening. And I'll go ahead and get started. Let me do a special shout out as well to my dear friend, Cameron Von Patterson, for giving us that wonderful slide that we used at the beginning of our PowerPoint. And the music that we played underneath was ancestor Leon Thomas doing the vocals to a classic tune by Pharoah Sanders. So I want to thank you all for joining us for this very special edition of Wisdom Wednesday. And for those of you who've been following us for the last almost 17 years of Wisdom Wednesday activities, you know that these programs are traditionally held the third Wednesday of each month. But because we were in Ghana last Wednesday, participating in the All African Diaspora Education Summit, which was held at Cape Coast University, we moved our annual report on the Asa Restoration Project back 1 week to today. So let me do a big special shout out to Dr. Ed Bush, one of the key organizers of the All African Diaspora Education Summit. Dr. Bush was responsible for bringing 320 souls from California primarily to the conference, which was held at Cape Coast University. We had a number of presentations by Africans from the diaspora, as well as professors from Cape Coast University, Queen Mothers, and just a really phenomenal week of stimulating information. And I'm very happy to have participated, to have had the opportunity to participate with my daughter. We shared the stage for a joint presentation. And so that was the reason why we pushed this session back 1 week to the 28th of September. But before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the recent passing of 2 very special souls. On September the 12th, we lost Ramsey Lewis, my homeboy from Chicago, phenomenal jazz pianist. And on this past Saturday, the 24th, we lost Pharoah Sanders, whose tune we played at the beginning of this program, The Creator Has a Master Plan. Today, September 28th, is also the 2nd anniversary of the passing of our dear sister Nana, Dr. Patricia Sekhmet Newton. And so in honor of these 3 magnificent souls, I'd like for us to take a few moments of silence to remember them, and also to think about the other souls near and dear to us who we lost this year. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It is so very important that we remember our ancestors. It's also equally important that we honor those people who are still with us, our family members and friends, because we never know the hour that they will leave us. We never know the hour that they will take their last breath. And so it doesn't do a heart good to have someone pass and you are not on good terms with them. It's so critically important that we use the time we have to build bridges of understanding, bridges of compassion, bridges of love with other souls so that we can get through this journey together. Now, to the mission at hand. For the past 13 years, I have presented a report on the work of the Asa Restoration Project. We typically do our excavations 4 months during the year, during the summer, typically between June and September. And the Acer Restoration Project is funding the excavation, conservation, and the restoration of 3 25th dynasty Kushite tombs on the west bank of Luxor, Egypt, in an area known as South Asa. We're right near the Valley of the Kings, the Valley of the Queens, and the Valley of the Nobles. When we began this work in 2008, we were working on just 3 tombs. We were excavating and restoring the tombs of Karabashkin, Karakamen, and Nezbanejed. But last season, we found 13 new tombs. And the discovery of these new tombs has confirmed that this site in South Asasif, where we are working, was a sacred necropolis, which was comprised of tombs of priests and priestesses of Amen, many of whom worked at Karnak Temple on the east bank of the Nile. And they are buried at this site, along with family members and friends and other souls who we are in the process of identifying. Every time we discover a new tomb, we discover the final resting place of a person. If we're fortunate to find their names, we can do what we all are supposed to do, call the names of ancestors so that they can live forever in our hearts and minds. We make new discoveries and find new tombs every single season. And typically what happens is toward the end of the season is when we make some of our biggest discoveries. And it kind of serves as a confirmation of the fact that Karakamen and Karabashkin and these other Kushite noblemen approve of what we're doing. They are congratulating us and giving us incentives to come back for another season the next year. So this year is no exception. One of our biggest discoveries this season has been the discovery of 400 fragments which belong to the second pillared hall in Karakamen's temple tomb. These fragments were found under the floor of a house. It was part of a foundation of a house that was built over these tombs by the former residents of this site. We had no idea that this discovery was there, and we kept finding fragments. So practically every day, our wonderful team of conservators are inserting these fragments into the proper location on the walls and the pillars in Karakamen's second pillared hall. So we are filling in the gaps and completing this incredible structure. We're also working diligently to prepare our site for the opening in 2025. Preparing the site entails creating access to the site, restoring the steps down into the tomb itself, producing signage. We also have plans for the development of a visitor center, and we will need to put a new roof, a new permanent roof on the tomb of Karakamen, whose ceiling collapsed sometime in the 1990s. This is, as you can imagine, a very expensive and time-consuming process, but we are getting it done every day, every month, every year. We are moving closer and closer to our goals of preparing the site to open to the public in 2025. So one of the reasons why we do this annual report is to let those of you who make regular contributions to the Asa Restoration Project, to let you see what we are doing, to let you see how your investment is paying off. And because of the fact that today's session, I'm not going to be showing any slides. I do that often. I want to take a break from slides this evening, but I encourage you all to go to the IKG YouTube channel, and you'll be able to see prior presentations that were done, updates on the Asa Restoration Project, and you'll see some incredible videos of other sessions that we've had that show you the tomb itself and the progress that's been made over the years. And I'll be traveling back to Egypt in November as we finish up the season to take a look at all of the wonderful discoveries that were made, all the progress that was also made during our reconstruction. And then I'll be returning to Egypt again in December, specifically December 15th through the 24th for our second annual Winter Solstice Study Tour. We had a phenomenal tour last December with over 65 people, where we had the marvelous opportunity to witness the winter solstice sunrise at Karnak Temple. And since our season will actually end next month in the end of October, I'll shoot to find some time before the end of the year to give you a final update on some of our latest discoveries. There are some things that we have discovered that I'm not at liberty to talk about right now. We have to follow protocols and wait until our final report is submitted to the Antiquities Department before we can talk about these things publicly. So we follow the protocols. We do what we are asked to do so that we can maintain a working relationship with the wonderful people in Egypt who have been hosting us for 14 years. A lot of people have asked us also about our 2023 study tour to Egypt. That information is listed on the IKG website, which is ikg-info.com. Big shout out to Christine Harper, who posts new information to our website and keeps it up to date. Our 2023 study tour will include a Nile cruise and some special additions, special attractions that we'll be sharing with those who are with us on the tour. So if you're interested in going, I encourage you to go to the website, fill out the brochure, send in a deposit to secure your space, and the balance has to be paid 60 days prior to departure. All the fees are paid to Consolidated Tours, who's been our marvelous tour company for since 1986. So let's get into tonight. Last Wednesday, September 21st, was a profoundly memorable day for four basic reasons. One, September 21st, last week, was the 103rd birthday of Kwame Nkrumah, the first elected president of Ghana. September 21st is also the 14th birthday of the Asa Restoration Project. September 21st was also the rebirthday of Chika Akua, who just joined us. Shout out to my brother. Hope you're feeling better. Sophia Bryant, Atlantis Browder, and myself. Chika and I were installed as chiefs. Sophia and Atlantis were installed as queen mothers in the town of Moray in Cape Coast, Ghana, West Africa. It was a phenomenal celebration, one that I would cherish for the rest of my life. It was indeed an honor for me to be installed along with my daughter. And to also be installed with two very good souls, Chika and Sophia. It's really, I'm at a loss almost to talk about how excited this day was and what it means to us, but we'll be sharing more about this special occasion as the days and weeks go on. And there's another reason, there's a fourth reason why September 21st is so important, so near and dear to my heart, because September 21st, the 21st of September is a date that is referenced in one of the biggest hits of Earth, Wind, and Fire. And yeah, we do have some plans for Earth, Wind, and Fire in 2025. We'll be sharing more information about that with you in the very near future. So regarding our enstoolment, a number of people have asked us some very basic and fundamental questions. What is my new name? My new name is Nana Segu Clarke, and Atlantis's new name is Nana Paraba II. Today, the 28th of September, is also a special day for me because it was on this day in 2016 that we were hosting a conference in Luxor in South Africa. It was a conference where we brought together archaeologists and other teams that are excavating tombs on the east and west bank of Luxor, primarily tombs associated with the late period 25th, 26th dynasty. And in conjunction with that conference, which was held at the Mummification Museum on the west bank of Luxor, we also did some tours to various sites so that the participants could see the work that was being done, the excavation and restoration work that was being done. We hosted a tour at our site in South Africa, but on the 26th of September, I visited two tombs in North Africa. And as I walked through those two tombs, me being the curious person that I am, I'm always looking around, familiarizing myself with the spaces that I'm in, looking at the architecture, looking at drawings, looking at the layout of rooms, and just taking it all in, using my artistic eye to understand something about the mindset of the people who created these spaces that we're moving in. And to my surprise, painted on the ceiling of two tombs, one 25th dynasty tomb and one 26th dynasty tomb, I saw a running spiral symbol, which is identical to the heart-shaped Akoma Sankofa symbol that has been used by the Akan people in Ghana, West Africa, for over 250 years. This blew my mind. It blew my mind because it lent credence to the ideas and the theories that have been put forth about migrations of populations of people from the Nile River Valley to the Niger River Valley. I've spoken often about a book written by a colleague of Cheikh Anta Diop, a book called Paths from the Nile, written by a Senegalese scholar by the name of Abubakar Lam, who referenced earlier works that talked about migrations of Africans beginning around the 25th dynasty, which is about 6th century BC, migrating to West Africa. These migrations continued until about the 6th century AD. And there is a great deal of evidence that is still being researched now to show that these Africans brought their cargo of knowledge out of the Nile River Valley into Senegal, into Ghana, into Nigeria, into Cameroon, into the Congo. And the last migration is believed to have wound up in Mali. And it is also believed that the Dogon are the inheritors of the astronomical knowledge that was brought from the East to the West. So there's a great deal of research that needs to be done to solidify this information, to document this information. But last week on the 21st, we had the occasion to see how truly miraculous this process is. As I mentioned earlier, 4 of us were enstooled in Moray, which is right outside of Cape Town in West Africa. And one of the things that we discovered was that the founder of Moray is said to have migrated to Ghana from Mali. And my name, Segu, is a name of a city in Mali, the 5th largest city in Mali. And as I was researching Segu and my name, making an effort to really understand this new label that I'm carrying that identifies my spirit, I found on Wikipedia a listing for Segu in Mali and a photograph which showed a Tekken in the center of a street. So I'm going to have to get a higher resolution photograph so that I can examine the carvings on it, as well as what appears to be a plaque at the base of it that maybe has some images of a couple of people. So I'll be doing some additional investigation to unlock that piece of the puzzle. But what was shared with us by Nana Obakesi and Nana Kwa David Whitaker, who are also co-sponsors of the conference that we attended last week, is that the people of Murray today have a song. And in that song, they sing of their ancestors having migrated there from the Nile Valley. Now, what's interesting is that they don't understand the significance. The residents of Murray today don't understand the significance. And that's going to be, our charge. That's going to be the charge of myself and Atlantis and Chika to raise the historical and cultural awareness of the residents of this town so that they can have a better understanding of where their ancestors have migrated from. We have the oral tradition, but we're going to be looking at other pieces of evidence that will help us create a seamless narrative that substantiates beyond a shadow of a doubt the migration of Africans from the Nile to the Niger. And hand in hand with that investigation will also be a further investigation of the migration of Africans from the west coast of Africa across the Atlantic Ocean to the Americas, us. So there's some interesting areas of research that hopefully we can set in motion and begin to draw to us other students, other scholars who can advance this research and help us document this historical phenomenon. Now, when the Asa Restoration Project was established in 2008, our goal was to document the Kushite presence in Kemet and also to preserve the legacy of Dr. Asa G. Hilliard III. Dr. Hilliard, as many of you all know, was my Jegna, was a personal friend, was a person who helped put me on this path, firmly put me on the path. And much of what I have done throughout my career is modeled on the life and the career of Dr. Hilliard. Many of you also know that it was Dr. Hilliard who wrote the introduction to my first book, From the Browder File. And Dr. Hilliard passed in Egypt at a conference in Aswan. He passed on the 13th of August. And it came as a crushing blow to everybody who knew and loved this man. Asa was so loved and so revered and so respected by people around the world that while I was grieving his loss, I was looking for a way that I can honor him. And I happened upon a meeting with Alina Pistakova, who had initiated the excavations in South Ossisif in 2006. Alina gave me a tour and it shared with me that they had run out of money to continue the work. And I made a commitment to continue to fund this work so that this project could continue. And I named the project, I named this work in honor of Asa Hilliard. So it's known as the Asa Restoration Project. And it's so interesting to see how pieces of this puzzle have been fitting together from the very beginning. The area where we're excavating is on the west bank of Luxor, Egypt, right east of the mountain range. The mountain range is known as the Ossisif Mountains, ASA-SIF, Asa. So the name was a natural, it was a perfect fit. And so I'm always feeling a profound sense of gratitude to feel pieces of this puzzle fitting together so wonderfully. I may not always know exactly what I'm doing all the time, but I'm being led by spirit. I'm being led by my ancestors. And thus far for 14 years, they've been leading us in a very positive and favorable direction. And so the Asa Restoration Project was created to provide information that we uncovered as we were excavating, as we analyzed this information. And my goal is to share this knowledge with all interested parties in Africa, all interested parties in the United States, all interested parties throughout the diaspora. We have skin in the game now. And so the role of the Asa Restoration Project is not solely limited to what we're doing in Egypt, but it's also about continuing the legacy of Dr. Hilliard, and that is education. It's about enlightenment. It's about the transformation of consciousness as a result of new information that allows you to see the past through new eyes. And so an essential part of the Asa Restoration Project will be the domestic application of this knowledge. And one of the new components that we did a partial introduction of this past June is the John Henrik Clark Enhanced History Project. On June the 10th, I believe it was, we unveiled the 25-foot long mural that is situated on the second floor of the Thurgood Marshall Center, where our offices, the offices of IKG, have been located for the past 17 years. And we're going to complete the unveiling of the rest of the murals on the second floor of the Thurgood Marshall Center on December the 10th. Initially, we had scheduled the unveiling for October the 29th, I believe, but there's so many things going on and I can only do so much. So I decided to save myself some undue stress and headache and push the final installation back to December the 10th. So we encourage you to stay tuned to IKG. We invite those of you to make sure that we have your email addresses. You can submit your email addresses on the IKG website. You'll be added to our listserv, and then you'll get regular announcements of all the activities that we'll be engaging in from this point forward. So stay tuned for future details on the unveiling of the John Henrik Clark Enhanced History Project. As a matter of fact, we also have on the IKG YouTube channel the video from that unveiling that was held in June of this year. I think you'll find it fascinating. You'll also have a chance to see this incredible mural, which depicts 8,000 years of African excellence and success. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, this one mural, which was wonderfully executed by my dear friend and colleague, Free Benjamin, is an incredible work of art. We do have posters available that are suitable for framing on the IKG website. You can order those. And we just encourage you all to see what we're doing, to continue to support what we're doing so that we have the resources necessary to continue this work. And as I mentioned earlier, you can also find videos of other Free Your Mind presentations, as well as updates on the Acer Restoration Project on the IKG YouTube channel. Now this year, 2022, is a very special year for two reasons. One, February the 3rd of this year marked the 40th anniversary of IKG. I gave my very first lecture at a 7-week series at the University of Maryland, not far from where I live right now, my very first lecture. And after that lecture series ended, I came into DC and did a series of lectures, a 7-week lecture series at WPFW, which was then located at 700 H Street Northwest in Washington, DC. And for those of you all who saw the opening PowerPoint presentation with the music of Pharoah Sanders underneath, you saw slides of some of the flyers that we've done over the past 40 years, commemorating a host of our activities, our Free Your Mind lectures, lectures in DC, radio program that we hosted at WPFW, as well as our study tours. 2022 is also a special year for me because October the 1st marks the 40th birthday of Atlantis Browder. And I'm so pleased to have had the opportunity to have Atlantis as a part of my life for these past 40 years, to be able to take her to Africa with me. She's been to Egypt with me. We've been to Ghana, Senegal, Gambia, the Ivory Coast. We've been to South Africa. And we just returned from Ghana this past Sunday. So part of my desire is to make sure that Atlantis understands early in her life who she is as a person of African ancestry, help her understand early in life the great legacy that she has inherited, and then to prepare her to continue advancing this work. So a big shout out to my daughter, Atlantis Browder. And what I like to do now, Atlantis, is to invite you to come back on. And I asked Atlantis to interview me and ask me a couple questions about my work, about our work, and what the future holds for IKG. So Atlantis, I turn the floor over to you.
All right. Thank you, Dad. And thank you for the early birthday wishes. So first and foremost, I want to congratulate you on 40 years of IKG. I can't believe it's been 40 years, let alone I'm turning 40 on Saturday.
Absolutely. Listen, can I interrupt you for 1 minute? I just saw that my good friend, my brother, James Sultan Walkie, just popped up. So he's joining us. And I think I may have told you this story before, but Brother Sultan was teaching at Howard University. I think he was teaching in the political science department at Howard University. And he arranged my very first lecture at Howard University. And that was in September of 1982. And you were late. You were supposed to have been born around the 21st of September, but you were late. And your mom and I had gone to the doctor toward the latter part of September. And the doctor said, well, if the baby hasn't come by the 30th of September, then come to the office and we'll induce labor. And I said, well, Doc, I have a lecture at Howard University that evening on the 30th. So would you mind if I did the lecture, and after the lecture, I'd bring my wife to the hospital and we can do the lecture. So I want to thank James Sultan, dear frat brother Walkie, for facilitating that event. And as soon as I finished the lecture, I packed up my things, my slide carousel, boxed everything up, came home, grabbed your mom, ran to Prince George's Hospital, and you were born early Friday morning on October the 1st. So that's how you came into being.
All right, thank you for that sweet memory. And I also want to echo the same sentiments, Dad, in terms of you being a part of my life, and just being the inspiration and just motivation for a lot of the things that I have been able to do and experience. So thank you for choosing to be a part of my life and committing to be such an excellent father. So it's been a wonderful 40 years, and I look forward to 2, 3, wait, how old are you now? 70?
I'm 71, baby.
All right, about at least 2, 3 more decades.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So congratulations again, Dad. And I want to start by just highlighting some of the work that you've done over the past 40 years. And I'll start with 1986, when I was 4 years old. You created the Egypt on the Potomac field trip. And it was originally called what?
It was originally called the Afrocentric Tour of Washington, D.C.
And now, why did you change the name? And when did you change the name, and why did you change the name?
Okay, well, the idea for Egypt on the Potomac came out of a grant that Tony Farr and I were working on to submit to UDC. And the grant focused on looking at the architectural influences on the layout, design, and development of Washington, D.C. most people know that my formal training is as a graphic designer and artist, but prior to coming to Washington, D.C., I took a year of architectural courses at University of Illinois Circle Campus. I had 2 years of architecture courses in high school at Oak Park. And I had wanted to be an architect, but I never got over my fear of math. And I wound up transferring from University of Illinois to Howard University, and then changed my major to design, graphic design and architecture. But I've always had a fascination in architecture. I've always had a fascination in buildings, how buildings are constructed, the thinking that goes into creating spaces that people move in. So even though I'm trained as an artist, and for the past 30 some odd years, I made a career for myself as a historian and quasi-Egyptologist. I look at history, I look at Egyptian history specifically through the eyes of an artist. And so I'm always looking at symbolic representations. I'm always looking at architecture and the thinking that goes into creating a space and why a building is here, why it has this particular design. And this proposal that we had submitted to the University of the District of Columbia was rejected. And I decided to turn the lemons into lemonade. And since we had done the research and had an outline for documenting the ancient Egyptian architectural influences on Washington, D.C., I decided to use that time that we had invested in this project and create what became the Afrocentric Tour of Washington, D.C. So it was a 3-hour activity. And when we first started it, I would rent a school bus, and we'd take about 40, 45 people on the bus and drive around the city. And as this activity picked up, we decided that to expand on this activity. And in 2005, I wrote the book Egypt on the Potomac, and opened the first IKG Cultural Resource Center on the corner. It was located on the corner of 4th and 8th Street Northeast of Washington, D.C. And one of the reasons I changed the name from an Afrocentric tour of Washington, D.C. to Egypt on the Potomac was understanding design, advertising, and marketing. I realized that there were many people in our community who didn't understand or didn't appreciate African history and culture. As a matter of fact, there's a certain segment of our community who is kind of turned off by the word Africa, who is turned off by the concept of anything African-centered. So in order to minimize people's inherent rejection of this activity, I decided to rebrand it as Egypt on the Potomac. So I didn't change the content at all. I just called it by a different name. And we've been flooded with field trips ever since, so much so that we now have a team of dedicated facilitators. We have about 12 facilitators now who handle the field trip. Big shout out to Sister Roxanne and Yahuwah and Akoma and Maisha and the rest of the team who handle the field trips. And the field trips are now being sponsored the first Saturday of each month. We were forced due to COVID to modify the field trip. And we modified it as a walking field trip, but it's our hope, it's our prayer that now that we're going to be living with COVID for the rest of our lives, and we have acclimated ourselves to that reality, we trust that beginning next season in April of 2023, we'll be able to return to the Thurgood Marshall Center, begin using the buses again, and do the entire Egypt on the Potomac activity.
All right. And I also want to give a shout out to 2 of our facilitators who are with us, Colette and Kamal. So thank you too, and for doing a great job as facilitators. And it's always interesting, Dad, because I know you say you don't want the field trip to be centered around Tony Browder, and it's about the information. And so our facilitators have been doing a good job to do exactly as you instruct them to do.
Yeah, I mean, and it's so very important that this information is bigger than me. It's bigger than Tony Browder. And what's important is the information, not the personality. So as our new facilitators, Kamal, Clarke, And as our older facilitators do these presentations, Maisha and Yahuwah and Quayle and the others do these presentations, people will associate the receiving of this knowledge, this transformative information, with the person who's delivering the information to them. And that's what I want to focus on, the delivery of the content, not necessarily the personality. So I can take Tony Browder out of the equation so that I can go on and do some other things and know that I have a competent team of facilitators who will ensure that this work will continue. And that's part of what this 40-year journey has been about.
So a year after you started the Egypt on the Potomac field trips, you then started the Free Your Mind lecture series, as well as your study tours to Egypt. So what was the inspiration behind starting those two?
The idea for the Free Your Mind lecture series came about when a group of students, a student organization at Howard University, had asked me if I would join them in co-sponsoring a lecture by Asa on the campus of Howard University. So I agreed and made the arrangements to do so. I put up half the money to make it happen. We bought Acer's ticket. And then a couple of weeks before the event was to take place, the student organization bailed out. I don't even recall why they bailed out, but I was left holding the bag. And I realized, well, I've already paid for Acer's ticket. I could find another venue on campus where we can hold his lecture. And all I need to do is to make sure I have enough people in the audience to cover my expenses. And that was the beginning of our Free Your Mind lecture series. So Acer was our first presenter, Naeem Akbar was our second, Edward Nichols was our third, Hunter Adams was our fourth. And we had, for over 4.5 years, brought together some of the greatest scholars who've ever walked this planet. And the real inspiration behind the Free Your Mind lecture series grew out of a conference that I attended in September of 1984. It was a Nile Valley Conference, which was held at Morehouse in Atlanta. That's when I met Charles Finch, reconnected with Asa, reconnected with Van Sertima. And over the course of a 4-day weekend, I was introduced to some of the most phenomenal information I had ever been exposed to in my life. The Nile Valley Conference was about documenting the African origins of Nile Valley culture and civilization. And we had scholars from the University of Chicago, from all over the world present. Sheikh Anta Diop was supposed to be the keynote speaker, but he had problems with his plane, wasn't able to attend. But as I sat in the audience, watching these magnificent speakers and just being mesmerized by the depth of their knowledge, I decided right then and there that that's what I wanted to do. And I also made a promise to myself that I wanted to bring some of these same speakers to Washington, D.C. I wanted, my friends and colleagues here in the nation's capital to have an opportunity to be exposed to the transformative information that I was exposed to. So that was the beginning of our Free Your Mind lecture series on Memorial Day in 1987. And it's now continuing in the form of our Wisdom Wednesday activities. So this is my way of giving back. It's my way of sharing information and recruiting new souls to cultivate an interest in African-American history and culture, and be an active participant in the re-education of our minds. And it was also that same year, 1987, that following in the footsteps of Asa Hilliard, I decided to do my very first study tour to Egypt, and we've been doing them regularly since 1987.
Okay. So after you started the field trip, after you started the Free Your Mind lecture series, and now doing study tours to Egypt, you published your very first book in 1989 from the Browder File, 22 essays on the African American experience. Now, what gave you the idea or desire to write a book?
Well,
especially in 1989.
That book was a byproduct of a bi-weekly newspaper article that I started writing in early 1987. I had done my very first interview on the Cathy Hughes Morning Show in November of 1986. And after that interview, I received a phone call from Dr. Francis Murphy, who worked at Howard University in the School of Communications. Dr. Murphy was a descendant of the Murphy family in Baltimore, who had started the Baltimore Afro-American newspaper. And they also had a DC branch of the newspaper, the DC, the Washington Afro-American newspaper. So Dr. Murphy heard my conversation with Kathy Hughes, and this was when she only had one radio station. She heard my conversation, and one of the topics that I discussed was the creation of the Negro. And Mrs. Murphy called me up after the show and asked me if I would be willing to write an article for the Afro on that topic. And I said, well, you know, I'm not a writer. I haven't written anything before, but she was adamant about me making a contribution to the publication. And she laid out the framework. And after that conversation, we must have spoken for about an hour or so. After that initial conversation, she convinced me to write a bi-weekly column for the Washington Afro-American newspaper. And the title of that column was From the Browder File. And she gave me the parameters for writing my column. We had limited space. So she said that my column should consist of 12 to 15 paragraphs. Each paragraph should be 2 to 3 sentences long, and each sentence should be about 12 to 15 words. So she gave me a framework to take my ideas and consolidate them into very coherent sound bites that would allow the reader to fully understand whatever subject matter I was writing about. And I wrote articles for the Afro for 2 years. And finally, after 2 years, I decided that I needed to publish something. So I went through my collection of articles and pulled out 22 of what I considered to be the best articles. And I formatted them. I got in contact with an editor, Sister Zelma Peterson, I think was her name. And I did a graphic to represent the theme of each of the 22 essays. And then I asked Acer if he would write the introduction to From the Browder File. And what I specifically wanted him to address are the things that account for Black people's inabilities to work together. He referenced these items in the very first Free Your Mind lecture that he did for us. And that information just stayed with me. So Asa was kind enough to write the introduction. And because of my experience in graphic design and advertising and my friendship with Paul Coates. Paul, I was doing some design work for Paul at the time. And I was talking to him about publishing this book and which path I should take. And Paul said, look, Tony, you're going to do everything. You can already do everything that a publisher would do. You've written a book, you have an editor, you're going to do the layout and design and the cover. You don't need to go to a publisher. You can cover all of these expenses yourself. And as a publisher, you sell the book and you get to keep all of the royalties. Typically, the average author, when they go to a publisher, only keeps 10% of the royalties from their book. The rest of the money goes to the publisher who handles the layout, design, the editing, and the marketing and distribution. But since that's my background, I was able to do all of that myself. And with Paul's guidance and help, man, I was able to publish my first book, February the 1st, 1989. And I'm so pleased to say that that book, From the Browder File, is still a bestseller. It's still a bestseller. And there are literally hundreds of thousands of people all around the world who have read that book. And if I had $1 for every time someone told me that the Browder File, From the Browder File, was the first book that they ever read, I'd be a millionaire. So, you know, I had no idea that the book would have this longevity. And that's what started the publishing arm of IKG.
Okay. So 1989 was also a special year for me. You invited me to take my first trip to Africa And I had no idea that that trip would lead to so many other opportunities. But 2 years after making that trip, we ended up writing and publishing, or you helped me write and publish my first book, 1991, my first trip to Africa. So why was it so important for you to take me to Africa at an early age and encourage me to write books and follow in your footsteps?
Well, I've told this story many times. I graduated from Howard University in 1974, but it wasn't until February the 21st, 1977, that I met Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, who had just published his book, They Came Before Columbus, The African Presence in America. And during that lecture, Dr. Van Sertima said that the ancient Egyptians were Africans, that they were Black. And that was the first time in my life anyone had ever told me that the ancient Egyptians, the Kemites, were African. My mind was blown. And I realized at that moment that I had been miseducated, even though I had attended predominantly Black schools all of my life. And we talked about Egypt. No one had ever shared with me the fact that these ancient Kemites, the founding parents of this ancient civilization, were indeed indigenous Africans. And that ignited within me a thirst, a desire to want to know more about African history, to want to know more about what I hadn't been taught in school. And so as a parent, I was committed to making sure that you learned about who you were as a person of African ancestry as early in your life as possible. So I'm sure you remember when I started taking you to our Free Your Mind lectures. You met all of the scholars. You would sometimes help them with the slide projector and doing different things. And so it made sense that you would have to go to Egypt with me. You would have to go to Africa with me. And it also made sense that you would write a book about your travels to Africa so that other children, other young souls who may never leave the state, would never leave the country, would have an opportunity to experience Africa by reading your book and be as transformed as you were by your first trip. So that's how that came to be. Do you think it was a wise decision?
It was one of the greatest decisions that you've ever made and helped me to see the importance of it. I was so young and can't say that I understood everything at that time, but looking back, certainly appreciate it. And I'm very grateful for the opportunities to travel, to expand my consciousness, and then really meeting a lot of our great scholars who are no longer with us. So it wasn't until I was older I realized how fortunate my upbringing was. So thank you, Dad.
You're welcome, daughter.
Appreciate it. So after you helped me write my first book, a year later in 92, you wrote your second publication, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. And that also is another book that people share, has changed their lives. So most folks are familiar with that book, but what I would like to do is kind of plant the seed, Dad, because for at least 10 years now, you've been talking about writing a second volume. So I was thinking I'm gonna kind of put you on a spot, but just to kind of plant the seed and whet the appetite of our attendees, what do you envision Nile Valley 2 being about?
Well, I can say that when I first published Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, it will be 30 years ago this coming December 21st is the anniversary of the publishing of Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. I was ambitious and anticipated that I would do 3 volumes, and they would each come out within a span of 2 to 3 years. Then life got in the way, and it's now 30 years. So I'm glad that things worked out the way that they did, because had I published the second volume, which was going to focus on the Egyptian influences on masonry, and also expand the work of Egypt on the Potomac, the ancient Kemetic influences on the layout, design, and development of Washington, D.C., as well as the architecture that I've been able to identify in other major cities throughout the United States and around the world. Since I've had more time to learn, to read, to grow, and particularly since I've had 14 years now involved in an archaeological excavation, this second volume is going to be far greater than I could have ever imagined. And one of the things that I'm making a commitment to do is slowing down my speaking engagements, slowing down my travel, so that I can get back to doing what I really love to do. And that's just writing and researching and producing more content. I've got about 4 or 5 books right up here, and I can't get those books out if I'm on the road. I can't get those books out if I'm doing, radio interviews or interviews for documentaries or what have you. So I'm going to have to intentionally slow down, step back, so that I can get at least 3 or 4 books out over the course of the next decade. And I can say that my life will be complete. And something else, let me just share this with you. We were at the conference in Cape Coast last week, and throughout the week, I can't tell you how many people came up to me. Oh man, I read your book from the Browder File when I was in college, or I bought the book for my son, and so I've had people who are my age. I've had people who were your age, Atlantis. I've had elders come up to me and tell me that they've read my books and how much they've appreciated my books. And as I started processing this, I realized that, my books, our books, have influenced 5 generations, 5 generations. My grandparents' generation, my parents' generation, my generation, your generation, and the generation of your contemporaries who have children now. That's 5 generations. So I had no idea that we would have such a broad and expansive impact, but there are other things that I want to do. There's other work that needs to be gotten out. There's other information that needs to be shared. There's other minds that need to be freed. And I'm grateful to have a phenomenal team working with me, assisting me to get this work done. And collectively, we will get it done.
Ashe. So one of the things that I love most is, as I shared you with the world, I always appreciate that you took your work seriously, and you never left me behind. You tagged me. I was tagging along with you pretty much everywhere that you went, and I can remember as early as 5, 6 years old, wanting to be just like you, because you were my role model. You were the person that guided my thoughts, guided my actions, just created an environment that was so powerful and nurturing. And so after you wrote your second book, or published your second book in 1992, you took me to West Africa, Ghana, Senegal, Gambia, the Ivory Coast. And then in 1995, you helped me to publish my second book, Africa on My Mind, Reflections of My Second Trip. So why did you decide to take me to West Africa? Why not any other countries on the continent? Why West Africa?
Well, based on the response of youth and adults to your first book, I realized that we had something special. I realized that there were many adults who were looking for material like that to share with their children. So it was important for me that I provide a means for other young Black children to know their history. I didn't grow up in an African-centered environment. I didn't go to an African-centered school, but I did grow up at a time where I learned to appreciate the value of a good education. I learned to appreciate reading. I learned how to write. I learned how to reason. So when I began to discover what I now refer to as forbidden knowledge, I read as much as I could, I processed as much as I could, and then I reformulated that information and presented it in an easy to digest manner such that the people that I knew needed this information were able to digest it easily. And I was doing that for adults, and I wanted you to also do the same thing for children. So since you have started your career as an author and a public speaker at the age of 8, I knew that other young people could look to you as a role model, that they could live vicariously through you. So the trip to West Africa was designed specifically for us to go to the countries, 4 countries, Ghana, Senegal, Gambia, and the Ivory Coast, so that we could visit the slave dungeons there and document how Africans came to America, so that we could be clear that what happened to us and who was responsible for putting us in this situation, not just to focus on the negative aspect of our enslavement and the Ma'afa, but to help us to understand, based on reading your first book, that slavery was just a very small part of our story, and that it's not the beginning. As Dr. Clarke says, if you begin your history in slavery, everything since then looks like progress. And as I have said for the last decade or so, if the story of our enslavement was a book of 1,000 pages, if the story of African people were a book of 1,000 pages, the story of our enslavement would begin on page 996 and only be 2 pages long. So my role is to tell the story of the first 995 pages of our journey through time and space, which is documented. So we don't have to make anything up. So that second book was designed to help those who are interested in knowing, understand how we got to America. And if they had cultivated an interest in Nile Valley civilization by reading your first book, or by reading from the Browder file, or by reading Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, they would also come to the conclusion that slavery is not the beginning of our story. It's just one sad chapter, but that's not the essence of who we are. So I wanted young people, our children specifically, to get that understanding so they could aspire to be more than just a descendant of an enslaved population, that they were in fact descendants of humanity, descendants of the oldest documented civilization known to mankind, descendants of people who spread their knowledge all throughout West Africa, Southern Africa, East Africa, and around the world. And these are stories that we have to tell, because unfortunately, even to this very day, our school systems are not interested in telling the truth about our history and culture. So we have to make our homes our schools, and our books are a way of providing parents and adults an opportunity to do just that.
Okay. So 1998, you wrote your third publication, Browder File 2 Survival Strategies. And I noticed that your approach with that book was a little bit different from Volume 1 and Nile Valley. It tended to focus more so on the practical application of information. So what kind of made you switch gears and focus on practical application?
Well, I'm a practical person. I've been self-employed for 42 years. And what I've done throughout my career is apply the knowledge that I've learned about life, about African history, about spiritual traditions, and certain values. I've applied that information in my life, and that has allowed me to accomplish everything that I have accomplished. And I decided to use the Browder file format to lay out 13 strategies for survival, 13 strategies for Africans in America to understand how we got, who we are, where we came from, what we have the capacity to do, and the best mode of accomplishing those objectives so that we could become the people that we were born to become. So that book has served as a guide, if you will, and is broken up into three components. Each of the survival strategy is broken up into three components. One is a inspirational piece that's designed to appeal to your right brain thinking, your intuitive faculty, something to inspire you. The second component is the statistical information that lays out why this information is important, why it's real, why it's practical. And then the third component is prescriptive, how to use the information in this particular strategy, how to apply it in your life so that you can see the results. And if the results are favorable, then you continue doing that work. So it was an opportunity for me to share with other souls information that had been passed on to me, information that I felt could lay out a black print, if you will, a path to cultivating a real sense of purpose in life so that there could be more souls involved in this journey of the restoration of African consciousness.
Okay. So before I continue, as we kind of wind down with highlighting some of the things that you've accomplished through IKG, I do want to invite our attendees to submit any questions that they have. We'll use the last 20 minutes or so to ask questions. So please make sure you use the Q&A tool, the Q&A box, to ask any questions that you have, either for my dad or myself. It'll make it much easier once we get to that segment of the program. So after writing all of these books, you established or opened the IKG Cultural Center. So why did it take you so long to create this space? More so, what led to you doing that in particular?
Well, the IKG Cultural Resource Center was an outgrowth of increased interest for our then Afrocentric tour of Washington, D.C., the rebranded Egypt on the Potomac field trip. So we started getting more, and when I first started doing the field trips, it was just something to do. When I felt like it, I would just say, I'm going to do an Afrocentric tour on this day, and I would advertise, sell tickets, fill up the bus, and do the field trip. But as the demand increased, I had schools, I had family reunions, I had churches that wanted to do the field trip. I realized that I couldn't handle this by myself. And so I decided to do two things. One, actually three things. I decided to write the book, Egypt on the Potomac, so that it would also meet the demand for increased interest in this activity. And if I was going to increase the field trips, then I needed to have a team of people who could conduct the field trips. So I began my first class and trained a core group of facilitators. And then I said, if I'm going to do the field trips as a regular activity, then I need a space for us to meet at. I need a space for us to come back and debrief. I need a space where I could have my products available. And so we opened the first IKG Cultural Resource Center on 4th and 8th Street in Northeast. And that was a real learning experience for me. I have a tendency sometimes to be very ambitious, and sometimes I know I'm ahead of the curve, right? And so the year that I opened the Cultural Resource Center, I rented the space, or I renovated the space, and had taken on a lot of responsibility. And I wasn't getting the response that I had hoped. And there was a number of things going on. So I was stressed. And if you recall, in 2005, in November 2005, I got ill, right? I I had rhabdomyolysis and was on dialysis. I was in the hospital, my second time being hospitalized. And, I've only been hospitalized twice in my life, in 1987 and in 2005. And as I reflect on those two hospitalizations, they both occurred at a time when I was burning the candle at both ends, when I was pushing myself too hard and I wasn't listening to my body. And so the creator has a way of making you listen when you don't listen. And in these two instances, I was knocked on my behind, I was hospitalized. And as I'm laying in the hospital, I have time now to think. I have time now to reflect on what I did in order to create the circumstances that resulted in my getting ill. I've lived my life with the understanding of cause and effect, or what some people call karma. Everything happens for a reason. And that whenever something goes wrong in my life, one of the first things that I would do is to look at what I did to contribute to this thing going wrong, what I did to contribute to my being hospitalized. And I'm in the bed, I can't get up, I can't work, I have time to think. And in thinking, I play back scenarios in my head, I get the answers. And once I receive those answers, I also find within the answer the solution. And when I apply the solution, things change. So it was 1987 when I was hospitalized. I realized I needed to make some changes. One of the first changes I made when I got out the hospital was to close down my graphic design business and decided to focus my attention solely on IKG, because again, I was burning the candle at both ends. I was doing my graphic design work and people were wearing me out. Any artist knows that the general public doesn't appreciate the time that it takes to create something. And I was just getting worn out trying to accommodate clients who, one, didn't appreciate my time and didn't want to adequately compensate me for my time. So I closed the business and decided to focus my attention full time on IKG. And what do you know what happened? I started writing from the Browder file. I started doing the Free Your Mind lecture series. I started doing study tours to Egypt. So this opportunity opened for me. The same thing happened in 2005 when I was hospitalized. I again reflected, I'm doing dialysis, once a day for 3 days in the hospital. And I'm sitting there 4 hours at a time, reflecting on what I did to bring on this problem, to bring this problem into my life. And once I got clarity, I knew what I needed to do in order to eradicate this problem from my life. Survival strategies, I don't just talk about stuff. I talk about what I live. I talk about what I know. I talk about practical information. And as a result of that experience, I closed down the Cultural Center on 8th Street because it was just too much for me. And I closed it down in December of 2005. And then in the spring of 2006, I ran into a friend, a colleague, who invited me to a program at the Thurgood Marshall Center. And he happened to be on the board of the Thurgood Marshall Center. And he said, Tony, there's space here. They're looking for people to rent space here. You could do the Cultural Center here. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I just closed it down. This thing made me sick. It made me sick. Why would I want to do this again? But when I looked at the numbers, Thurgood Marshall Center, my rent was 2/3 less at the Thurgood Marshall Center than what I had been paying before. Plus, I had a facility that was 4 times larger than I had on 8th Street, plus a parking lot. So I had everything that I needed. And I was right near the metro. So I had everything I needed to reopen the IKG Cultural Resource Center. And we've been there for, 14, 15, 16 years now. So that was the right fit for us. And that's how they came to be. Nope, you're muted, Atlantis. Unmute yourself.
So if I may, just to backtrack a little bit, because what you're sharing makes me think about the importance of applying what we know. So when you opened the first cultural center on 8th Street, and you got sick. And I remember being very scared and concerned because throughout my entire life, you've always been a healthy person. You've been a vegetarian. In my eyes, you've done all of the right things to be successful and to keep yourself healthy and active. And so I always enjoy when you share the story about your experience in the hospital. And I think it speaks to a concept that you helped me to understand very early on in terms of the power of the mind and the power that we have to play an important role in healing ourselves mentally and physically. So if you don't mind taking a minute to share how you were able to push through outside of, reducing stress, but more specifically what you did to push through that physical ailment.
Okay.
Remember?
Okay, give me a hint.
So remember the doctor told you something about having to be on dialysis for the rest of your life.
Well, that part of the story. Well, that was after I got out the hospital. Okay, with two parts. So as I'm laying in the hospital, I was the first time I went to the matter of fact, let me just give you some context. So I had been ill. I had gone to my doctor and he said I had a urinary tract infection, gave me antibiotics. I was taking the antibiotics for a week. I wasn't feeling better. So I called my doc and he said, well, you should go to the emergency room. I went to the emergency room. Doctor drew my blood, came back and said, Mr. Browder, we need to do another blood sample because we're not sure of what we have here. And so, if you don't mind, we want to draw some more blood. Drew some more blood. He came back and he said, well, Mr. Browder, you're suffering from rhabdomyolysis. You're in kidney failure. And had you not been as healthy as you are, you would have been dead by now. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to admit you to the hospital, take you into surgery, and they put 2 tubes in my neck and then took me down to dialysis, where they hooked me up to a machine that literally sucked the blood out of my body, cleansed it, and put it back in my body. So in a period of less than 12 hours, I go from being in my bed at home, in the emergency room, surgery, and now laying on a bed in dialysis. And as I'm contemplating this, I'm in this room with about a dozen other people who are on that dialysis, and they're all elders, and they look like they're dead. They look like they're a breath away from death. And there was a nurse in the room who was attending to all of us who were being dialyzed. And this woman spoke in 2 volumes, loud and louder. And I had to be in that space for 4 hours. And I'm just processing, am I going to have to do this for the rest of my life? If I have to do dialysis once a week, twice a week, or whatever, that means I can't travel. I can't go to Africa. I can't do the things that give my life meaning. And that wasn't acceptable to me. So we did the first round of dialysis, came back to my hospital room, and the doctor said, well, Mr. Browder, we noticed that your blood pressure was elevated, and so we want to put you on blood pressure medication. I said, no, that's not happening. You go to emergency surgery and get 2 tubes in your neck and then be taken down to dialysis and be in a room where there's all this pressure. Your blood pressure will go up too. But now I know what to expect. I know what to do. I do a meditation. I'll calm myself so that I can take control of this situation. And I declined to take the blood pressure medication because I was going to assume responsibility for managing my own health. And so the doctors found from the first round of dialysis that my creatinine level had dropped from 19 to 17. So the average creatinine level is like 0.7. Mine was 19. So they saw that dialysis was working, and they scheduled me for dialysis every other day, right? So as I'm in the hospital room, I'm processing what I did to wind up in the hospital. And so I apologize to my body for not listening. I apologize to my kidneys for stressing them out. And I asked my body to forgive me. I called out to my grandmother, who's an ancestor and who loves me dearly. And I asked her for protection and guidance and inspiration. And by reprogramming my mind, I was able to realign my body such that dialysis was working for me. And after 3 rounds of dialysis, I think my creatinine level dropped down to 12. They released me from the hospital and said that I needed to go to an outpatient facility in order to finish the process. Well, I get to this facility, and again, I still have these 2 tubes in my neck. I get to this facility in Columbia, Maryland. I'll never forget it. And the woman there tells me, well, Mr. Browder, you have the tubes that you have are for emergency dialysis. And so we're going to need to schedule you for surgery so that you can get a port either in your arm or your chest so that we can have direct access to you. And I looked at that woman, I said, no, ma'am, you do not understand. This is a temporary relationship. I'm only going to be here for a week and then I'm done. I know what to do to realign my body, and you all are going to make a fortune off of me. So I had already done the math. There were about 12 rooms, 12 chairs in that dialysis facility. It takes about 4 hours for each patient. They work around the clock. They can do 3 rounds of patients per day at a cost of $2,000 to $3,000. It's a money grab. And I refused to participate in that. So when I came to do dialysis, I wouldn't turn on the television. I would either bring my headset and listen to some music, some Pharoah Sanders, some Brother Ah. I would read some books. I would meditate, and I facilitated in the healing of my body. And as a consequence, after 3 rounds of dialysis, I was done. So that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
All right. Thank you for sharing that, Dad. So we have lots of questions coming in. So we'll begin to wind down in a moment so we can get to those questions. Okay. But so in 2005, after publishing Egypt on the Potomac and opening the first IKG Cultural Resource Center, 3 years later, you established the Asa Restoration Project, and you spoke a little bit about that earlier. But is there anything else that you want to share in terms of the project, what it's meant to you, and how it's impacted your life over the last 14 years? Sure.
Well, the first aspect of the Acer Restoration Project was that it was a means of helping me grieve the loss of Acer. It also gave me an opportunity to do what I was born to do. You know, Dr. Welsing, who, you know, we knew very, very well, Dr. Welsing said that every person is born with a cosmic assignment. And I now understand that I was supposed to be involved in this excavation in South Asa. Everything that I had been doing prior to 2008 was preparing me for this process. So in one of the Wisdom Wednesday sessions I did a couple of years ago, I laid out that story of how my colleague, my friend, my brother, Abanaga Gabriel, insisted that I come to Egypt early. We did a tour to the Western Desert, and then I stayed in his apartment, and it was Abanaga who sent his cousin Hassan to me one evening and put me in contact with Alina. And I went to visit her the next day, and she gave me a tour of the partially excavated first Pullet Hall of Clarke tomb. I made the commitment to raise funds, and 14 years later, we continue to make history. So I'm not an archaeologist. I'm not an Egyptologist in the traditional sense of the word, but I'm a person who listens. I'm a person who learns. I'm a person who believes that the only limitations you have are the limitations that you put on yourself. So I have been fortunate to have worked with people who understand and appreciate what I bring to the table. And, you know, Alina has done a phenomenal job of guiding this project forward. You know, I've been bringing the money, and Alina said, well, Tony, you can't just give us the money to do this work. You have to be here. She insisted that I come. She insisted that I be there and be an active participant in this process. So it's one of the most phenomenal aspects of my life. I never would have dreamt in 1,000 years that I'd be doing this. And since I am involved, I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt that I feel a profound sense of familiarity in that space. As I walk through Clarke tomb, it's like I've been there before. I know this space. And I like to think that we have a special relationship with these Kushite ancestors, and that they're happy that we're there. They protect us, they guide us, they bless us, they empower us to do what no other African American in the history of Egyptology has done, and that is to fund and fully participate in an archaeological excavation. And one of the ways that I conceived of doing this is to make this a community project. I established the Asa Restoration Project as a nonprofit, a 501c3, and I figured I could use the cachet of my popularity as a speaker, as an author, and encourage people who have been moved by my work to support the Asa Restoration Project and be able to write off their support, their investment in the project on their taxes. So it's a win-win situation. And we are making history. We make history every single year. And when 2025 comes around, people will see that this hard work has paid off. It has opened doors that will forever transform the consciousness of people of African ancestry wherever they find themselves.
Okay. And before I transition to the last two highlights, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge all of those individuals, many of whom are in this space with us. I want to acknowledge you all for supporting the Asa Restoration Project because this work could not be carried out without your financial support and other ways that you all have contributed. So thank you all so much for helping us to do this great work. So, Dad, you've written books, you've done study tours to Egypt for decades, excavating 25th Dynasty tombs, and you still manage to create new projects, get involved in new projects. CII in 2017, you and Deborah Watkins, the founder of a Being a Black Education Network, established the Cultural Imperative Initiative. So how did that get started? And what made you kind of take a different route in terms of focusing now on programs specifically for young people to learn this information?
Sure. Well, actually, Deborah Watkins is an educator's educator. She's a fundraiser. And she was aware of my work and invited me to come to California, come to San Jose, California, where the African-American population is about 5%. And the African-American students in high schools are terribly underserved. They learn little to anything about their history and culture. They're typically the minority in all of their classes. So we made arrangements for me to come to California 1 weekend a month. And I think I did that for about 4 or 5 years. And I would go to 3 different high schools, pull out groups of African-American students and teach them. We would read and write reflection papers on some of the essays from the Browder file. So essentially what I did with these high school students, Atlantis, was the same thing that I did with you all of your life. Immerse these young souls in positive aspects of African and African-American history and culture so that they can see themselves through new eyes. They could appreciate the value of an education. They can appreciate being African, and they can make an important contribution to their lives, to their families' lives, to their community, and to the larger world. So that's CII. And I'm pleased that you have now come on board as we have expanded CII into CIP, Cultural Imperative Program, and made it a national program. And you're now running that using your expertise as an educator to design the curriculum and just take everything to the next level. So it's a natural progression, and it's a part of this life. It's a part of our lives, and I'm glad things are working out as they are.
Right. So with your most recent celebration or highlight, the John Henrik Clark Enhanced History Project, and being enstooled as a chief in Ghana, all in 2022. So share with folks a little bit about the Clark Project and also what it feels like to be a Nana, a chief.
Well, If folk want to get more information about the John Henrik Clarke Enhanced History Project, I encourage you to go to the IKG YouTube channel and see the videotape of the presentation we did on June the 10th, I believe it was, June the 11th. So you'll see that the Clarke Project, you'll see the mural, you'll get a chance to hear from Atlantis, from Deborah Watkins, from Friar Rose Sanders, and you get to see this magnificent work of art and see what the larger vision is and why I created the John Henrik Clarke Enhanced History Project. Dr. Clark was another soul like Asa Hilliard who left an indelible impression on my soul. I saw Dr. Clark speak for the first time a month after I returned from my first trip to Egypt in 1981. And I just fell in love with this man. I fell in love with his brilliance. I fell in love with his mastery of the information. I fell in love with his mode of storytelling. And I have a confession to make that much of what I've done throughout my career is modeled on the work of three men, Asa Hilliard, John Henrik Clarke, and John Jackson. They are my models. And so it's an honor for me to be acknowledged by my colleagues and brothers and sisters in Ghana. It's an honor for me to be enstooled and to be enstooled in a location that has linkages to the Nile Valley. It's important for me to just expand the work that I'm doing and have an opportunity to work closely with continental Africans in their own hometown, learn more about them. So we've got a lot of work to do as we get brought up to speed on what is required of us as Nanas, Chika, Sophia, you and myself. We've got a lot of work to do. So we'll be going back to continue that work. And it's going to make us better people. It's going to allow us to transform lives in Ghana and also help us to find some souls who can work with us in expanding this work and helping to spread it throughout Ghana, throughout the continent of Africa, and around the world. So I'm at a point in my life where we need to replicate ourselves and train people who are competent, who are trustworthy, who have the same spirit and vision as we, so that we can ultimately be victorious in this effort to free our minds.
So, Dad, you've done a lot in 40 years. Now, please share with the audience, how did you find the time to do all of this great work?
So what have I been telling you, Atlantis, all your life? The clock is ticking, right? The clock is ticking. Everybody has 24 hours in a day. And what you do in those 24 hours determines your life. I've been blessed to be self-employed. I've been blessed to have control over my time, control over the flow of my income. And I've chosen to use the money that I make to invest in my company to finance the work that I'm doing. That has allowed me to live the life that I've lived the last 40 some odd years. And so I'm at the point in my life now where I've been working hard, and people who know me know that I'm always working. I can't do vacations. You know, I can't sit still for more than a day or two. I'm built to do something. I'm built to be busy. Maybe that's what the B in Browder stands for. So at this point in my life, I'm looking at legacy building. I'm looking at preparing you to take over the operations, day-to-day operations of IKG, to take over the study tours to Egypt after 2025. We have a wonderful team of facilitators who are going to be handling Egypt on the Potomac activities and hopefully expanding those activities. Sister Adjoa has been handling Wisdom Wednesday for over a decade now. So I am blessed to be in the company of young people. When I say young people, I mean folk younger than me. Most of them are in their 30s and 40s, who I have had the pleasure of knowing for over a decade, people that I trust, people that I love, people that I respect. And I can parcel off pieces of my business, pieces of my life, and hand them over to other people who I know will care for these works just as I have cared for them. And again, to reinforce the fact that it is the information that's important. And I firmly believe that you have to take personality out of the equation. Yeah, Tony Browder did this, Tony Browder did that, but it's the information that's important. And I want to do everything I can to cultivate the same spirit of learning, the same desire to share knowledge with as many people as possible so that we can change our thinking, we could change our behavior, and ultimately we can change the world. So as Chika said in his presentation last week, this is a marathon. It's a marathon and it's a relay race. And I'm passing the baton to souls that I love, souls that I trust. And I'm going to be on the sidelines cheering you on, always in a position to advise you when advice is needed and to ensure that you can continue to run this race as far and as fast as you can. And then when you pass the baton on to the next person, the person who receives that baton can continue this work and take it even further. And that's the reason we're here. That's why we're living. And if you understand that, it can truly make life worth living.
Absolutely. So I saw in the chat, we have a few people who are joining us for Wisdom Wednesday for the first time. But I know a larger number of people who are in this space have been around watching you grow, watching your work, supporting your work for decades now. So what's new? What's next for IKG?
Well, I need to get some writing done. We need to finish the John Henrik Clarke Enhanced History Project. There is a book that will accompany that project. There will be a curriculum that will accompany the book. And we'll produce more content. We'll produce, maybe some documentaries. And I will throw a teaser out there. We will have an audio book coming out hopefully within the next year. And it will be read by someone who will blow your mind and will elevate this work to the next level. So, I'm so appreciative of the fact that I'm being contacted by people, next level people who have influence, and they appreciate the work that I'm doing, and I'm able to partner with them. So you're going to be seeing the work of IKG expand incredibly over the course of the next decade. And that pleases my soul. Absolutely.
Sounds good. So as promised, we're going to reserve the last 20 minutes to answer as many questions as we can. We have about 23 questions, now 24 questions. So we'll do our best to answer. So Dad, if you don't mind, I'm going to give you some instructions that I know you'll be happy to follow,
Yep.
which is to limit your response to approximately a minute, just so we can try to get through as many questions
I can do that
as possible. All right.
Okay.
Excellent. Oh, and also let me just say this before I read off some of the questions, just to reiterate a couple of points. We will post this video on the IKG YouTube page, and I'll make sure I put all of the information in the chat so you can check out our YouTube page for those who are interested in traveling on our upcoming study tour in December or next summer. 2023. I'll put the link in the chat for you to check out the brochure. And for those of you all who are already, who are not already on the IKG listserv, I'll drop the link in the chat so you can sign up to receive notifications about our programs and other events. And then I also want to make sure I include some information about ways that you can support IKG, support the Asa Restoration Project, so that we can continue to do this work for another 40 plus decades. I'm sorry, 4 decades, 40 years.
Okay.
All right. Well, hey,
You're going to be doing the heavy lifting now. So,
yeah, but I mean, if we can keep this work going, we're gonna have to do some serious training to prepare the next generation. But the next goal is to keep this going as long as we can. So when you're not here, I'm picking up the the torch. And then when I'm no longer here, there are others who I hope will continue this work. So let's get started with the Q&A.
Okay.
The first question comes from Katrina. Atlantis, in your opinion, what age would you recommend children to make their first trip to Egypt based on your experience and knowledge you obtained on your first trip to Egypt? So that's an excellent question. And I always encourage adults parents to take their children with them, particularly on international trips as early as possible. But I think a good starting point would be about the same age that I was, 7. I'm old enough to kind of move on my own, not to be too much of a headache, but really you're just planting the seed. So the idea is that even after they make their first trip, hopefully you'll take them on additional trips, traveling throughout the world. So I think 7 years old would be a good starting point for taking your child on their first trip to Egypt. The next question comes from Cheryl. Can we watch the Ghana conference online anywhere? Also, does Mr. Browder have any new books coming out?
The Ghana conference was not streamed. There was a team of folks. As a matter of fact, the team was led by a wonderful brother who I had the pleasure of meeting during the conference by the name of Imhotep. What's Imhotep's last name? Lasana Imhotep. Yes, Lasana Imhotep. And he is the producer of the documentary that was filmed, and that will be forthcoming at some time in the future. So just keep your eyes and ears open, and you'll be hearing more about that. The next piece that I need to work on, I'm looking at revising Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization in preparation for the 30-year anniversary, and also then doing the publication for the John Henrik Clark Enhanced History Project. So those are 2 projects that will be coming out within the next year.
All right. Cheryl also wants to know, are you documenting your discoveries in Egypt and the restoration of the tombs into a book? So Cheryl, that means you haven't read Finding Karakamoon. That was our first publication. Granted, it was a number of years ago. So Dad, do you plan to, well, I know Alina has published a number of books, but do you plan to publish anything through IKG about?
Yeah, Alina and the team have done, I think, the 4th volume of a work on South Ossetia. It's more of a technical and scholarly piece, but it lays out a lot of the work that's done. Those publications are available online. I do need to update the Finding Karakamoon, and yeah, so I'm going to need to do something. We have been documenting all of our findings, and I would think that as we move closer to 2025 and the grand opening, we'll have some content, some visual content, as well as more publications that will be available. So stay tuned.
All right. Our next question comes from another awesome individual, Dr. Joyce King. Hey, Dr. King. She says, congratulations and happy birthday. Thank you. Chief Segu, is there anything you would do differently looking back over your 40 years?
Is there anything that I would do differently? Well, I think one of the things that I would like to think I would do differently would be to major in engineering. I say that because I've got several cousins, Vicky and Frank, who are engineers, Dietrich, who's an engineer, several friends who are engineers, and I like how engineers think. Engineers are trained to problem solve. And, you know, with me being the type of personality that I am, being a Leo, I'm all about problem solving. And, you know, I've learned something from my dear sister, Nana Segmet. She told me years ago something that I have never forgotten, and that is people have a tendency to run from problems, to think that problems are bad, when in fact, problems are wonderful things. Why? Because every problem has a solution. Every problem has a solution. And once you study what sets a problem in motion, dissect that, you can begin to unpack that problem, dissolve that problem, and that then prepares you for the next problem that's coming. We'll never run out of problems, but what we can do is cultivate the skill set to deal with them effectively, or to see them coming and move out the way so that they don't impact us. And what I've learned from my friends and family members who are engineers is that engineering teaches you how to problem solve. So if I had to do it again, I think I would major in engineering, and that would probably allow me to do what I'm doing now even better. But maybe the next lifetime I may come back as an engineer. Who knows? Who knows? I'm keeping my options open.
All right. Next question comes from Clifton. He said that he heard you talk about the transformational experience you had under the stars one night in Africa. He'd love to hear you speak more about that for a moment.
Sure. Well, that was in the Wisdom Wednesday presentation I did, I think maybe 2 years, it was either last year or year before last. I talked about the trip that I made in the Western Desert with my friend Abunaga Gabriel. And the short version of that trip was that my friend, who had been my guide in Egypt for 21 years, he was like a brother to me. He had been encouraging me to come to Egypt early so that I can go out with him into the Western Desert for a tour that he created. He created the first tours into the Western Desert. It's off the beaten path. Very few people have done it. He said that no Black people have ever done this tour before. And we hooked up early July. He met me in Cairo. We jumped into a car with a driver, satellite phone, camping gear, and hit the road. Went out into the desert. And I just saw some incredible things. And one of the things that impressed me the most was one morning, early in the morning, I was awakened by a noise, and it turned out to be a desert fox eating some of the scraps of food off to the side, and startled me. I couldn't go back to sleep. So I just sat there and looked up at the sky. We're in the middle of the desert. There's no lights around anywhere. And I could see the sky for the first time. I could understand the meaning of the statement, a blanket of stars in the sky. Every square inch of the blackness of space was dotted with a star or a planet. And as my eyes became accustomed to the darkness, I could see the Milky Way. Clear as night, I could see the Milky Way. And I began to understand what our ancient ancestors in the Nile Valley understood. The Milky Way was the river in the sky. The Milky Way was a metaphor for a heavenly metaphor for the Nile River. And I just began, my mind just expanded, and I was able to just comprehend concepts and ideas that were far beyond the normal realm of understanding. And it was a truly transformative experience that prepared me for meeting Alina 2 days later and opened the door for the Asa Restoration Project. So those who know me know that I live my life with the understanding that there is no such thing as chance, coincidence, or accident in a universe ruled by law and divine order. I understand that everything happens for a reason. And once you understand the reasoning behind the happenings of things and align yourself with those reasonings, then you can help control and guide the happenings and go where you want to go.
Excellent. All right, our next question comes from Heather. She asked, in this anti-CRT environment we now find ourselves, what would you suggest to parents on how they can navigate making sure their children get an identity-affirming education?
Well, first of all, the parents have to educate themselves. We don't spend enough time reading. One of the things that I've always said is that if you have more televisions in your home than you have books, there's going to be problems in your household. If your children spend more time watching television, playing video games, than reading the books and having intelligent discussions about what they've read, there's going to be problems in your community and in your school. So we have to make learning, the love of learning, a priority in our lives. So it begins first with parents modeling for their children the value of getting an education. And we have to do away with this idea that being smart is being white. The being articulate or talking proper is talking white. We have to understand very clearly that Africans were the very first human beings on the planet. We know that that is a scientifically documented fact. We know that Africans were the first people to read, to write, and to reason. So to be articulate, to be intelligent, to read, to write, to create is to be African. And we're not Negroes. We're not colored people. We're none of those things. And we have an obligation and a responsibility to become our authentic selves. And we need more parents to be responsible, to take responsibility for the lives that you brought into the world, invest in your children so that they can make positive contributions, because our children, as well as all of us, are vessels through which our ancestors worked through. And we have to make sure that our vessels are as whole and complete and prepared as possible, because of the work that's going to need to be done to save the world over the course of the next decade. We've got work to do and we don't have time to waste.
All right. So I'm going to combine the next two questions. One from Frenchie, another from Kermit. Frenchie acknowledged that they're sorry to hear about the passing of the great Pharaoh Sanders. Love the music introduction. Did you ever have the pleasure of meeting Pharaoh Sanders?
I never met him, but I did have the opportunity to see him perform in DC last year. And it was an amazing performance. The only thing that I was disappointed with was the fact that he didn't play my favorite song, and that is "We Gotta Have Freedom." Those who live in DC know that that was the theme song for Hadari Ali. Every Thursday morning, he would play that song, and it's a killer. It's a classic, and if you haven't heard it, listen to it, and it will become one of your favorites. And I just saw a quick text from my guy, my main man, my good brother, Leonard Dunstan. I am a Leo. My birthday is July 26th.
All right. And the next question was about the author of the book you mentioned, Paths from the Nile.
Right. Abubakar Lam is his name. He is a Senegalese scholar, Senegalese historian. The book is only available in French. It was published by Présence Africa. Paul Coase and I had an opportunity to go to Présence Africa when we were in Paris in April. So the book is not available in English just yet, but it's, and maybe we can get someone to republish the book in English, because it's a significant work, one that more people need to be familiarize themselves with, so that they can understand that Africans in West Africa are descendants of Africans from East Africa in the Nile Valley. And since Africans in America are descendants of West Africans, it also implies that African Americans are genetically related to Africans from the Nile Valley. That's what Dr. Ben said. That's what Sheikh Anta Diop said. That's what Van Sertima said. So our scholars, some of the people who've transformed my lives, have been saying this for decades, but this information, these truths, have not made it out to the general public. Why? Because of a concerted effort on the part of our oppressors to suppress the truth, which means that we have an obligation, we have a responsibility to do whatever we have to access the truth and to free our minds, because people are doubling down. They don't want this information to get out. We are under as much pressure now to prevent the teaching of historical truths. Now, we're under as much pressure now as we were in the 1980s and 90s with the African Senate movement, as we were in the 1950s when schools were desegregated. As a matter of fact, we're probably in worse shape now than we were 50 years ago, because we don't have the cultural and family institutions in place to help us, to help our young children. So we have work to do. Brother Poe, you're right. We are at war. And in a war, the first casualty of war is the truth. And the first battlefield in any war is the mind. So Asa Hilliard in his very first lecture, talked about free your mind by returning to the source. The knowledge and information is there. All we need to do is to cultivate the right consciousness to access it. And once we begin to reacquaint ourselves with these profound truths, we then will become capable vessels through which our ancestors will work through and do their best work. And I know we got 4 minutes left, so let me just make this statement before we close. I want everybody to see the woman king and just dismiss the naysayers who are trying to tear this movie down. See the woman king. And when you go see it, stay for the final scene after the credits. That final scene is the heart and soul of the movie. That final scene is what this whole thing is all about. So there are gems of knowledge in that film that those with eyes to see, ears to hear, and a soul to feel will resonate with. And we need to sync ourselves with those messages that are there to help us free our mind. I was talking to Paul Coates today. They did a screening of The Woman King last night in Colombia. And we are going to do a screening of Wakanda Forever in November. So stay tuned. We're going to rent a theater in DC. We're going to put the word out, and we want all of you all to come out and watch this film as a community. And there will be discussions about that film, as I will have a discussion at some point in time in the near future on The Woman King. So just be prepared. So Atlantis, one more thing, if I can ask of you before we leave, I just received a couple of hours ago a short video overview of our enstoolment. So I want to close out by sharing that video. It's about 4 minutes long. So after the 9 o'clock hour, I'll share the video and invite everyone to witness the enstoolment that took place a week ago today.
All right, so you're going to show it on the Zoom tonight?
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen and show the video.
Okay. All right. And I do apologize in advance. I know we won't be able to get to everybody's question. Geez, sorry, I had 1 or 2 questions I wanted to close out with. Okay. Oh, yes, Mama McKinney.
Hey,
How are you? So Mama McKinney asked if you're planning to write your biography. Each time I hear you share, I learn something new, which is encouraging and motivating.
Well, for the past year, I have been working with a young brother by the name of Taharka Ade, who started working on my biography when he was a graduate student at Temple in the working on his PhD in Africana Studies. And Brother Taharka was encouraged by Dr. Asante. Taharka had come to Egypt and participated in our mission the summer before he began graduate school, and cultivated a relationship with Dr. Asante, the founder of the program at Temple University. And Dr. Asante said, well, you're pretty tight with Tony, and no one, he's lived an interesting life, and no one has done a biography on him. You should do that. So Brother Tark and I, for the past year now, would meet by Zoom twice a month, and I shared my story with him. And he's in the process now of writing everything. So it will probably take a year to finish everything, to edit. But yeah, that will be forthcoming. My memoirs, my biography. I'm not sure how it will be presented, but that's in the works and it's coming.
Okay. So it's 9 o'clock, and that I would like to make a suggestion or ask you a question. There are still about 26 questions, and some of them are really great questions. Folks have been sharing how much they've enjoyed tonight's program, and even those, as Mama McKinney shared, those who've known you for a long time now, whenever they hear you speak, you're always sharing something new. So I think some of these questions would be great additions. So I was thinking maybe we can, once you get back from your trip to Pittsburgh, we can maybe set aside some time to answer these questions, and I can add it on to the video and post it
Okay.
on a YouTube page next week.
We can do that. We can certainly do that. I'll be in Pittsburgh this Friday. Let me pull up the flyer real quick. I'll be in Pittsburgh this Friday at Carlow University at 6 o'clock, from 6 to 8, doing a lecture, Ancient Egypt, Light of the World. And it's free. It's a free event. And if you're in Pittsburgh, I encourage you to come out. Carlow University, 6 to 8 p.m. this Friday on the 30th of September. Yep.
All right, excellent. So for those of you all who did not get your question answered, just give us some time to prepare those responses and record it, and then we'll have it posted and posted on our YouTube channel. So I do want to take this time to just thank everyone for staying with us and just supporting my father. It's really inspiring to see how people have supported you, Dad, and continue to support you. And so I trust that these same individuals or community members will be the same ones to help support me and continue this work. And they will pass the torch on to their children, their nieces and nephews. So that way, when we are no longer here, we can be very pleased and just reassured to know that this work was not in vain. So thank you, Dad. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. And I'll let you close out with your...
So let me say this too. One of the other things that we've been talking about doing for 2023 is some more webinars. Some more webinars. We did a couple last year and got great responses from that. So I'm looking at carving out some time to do that and taking advantage of Zoom, taking advantage of the technology. We had at one point over 200 people watching tonight's session. So we'll do more of that. So just stay tuned to IKG and we'll keep you in the know. So let me close out by sharing this video of last week's enstoolment in Moray, the Cape Coast region of Ghana, West Africa. Someone just sent it to me a little while ago. So let me, do this and share my screen share. And let's show it. Okay, it's only about it's about 11 minutes. I think there's some commercials embedded in this. I haven't edited it yet, but enjoy. Take care. Peace.
What's up, everybody? Thank you for checking me out. My name is Eko Simpson. I'm a Ghanaian and I live in Ghana. Well, you are watching this channel because somebody introduced you to it. It was recommended or suggested to you on YouTube. Basically, my YouTube channel is to connect Africans in the motherland to Africans in the diaspora. Hey, what's good, family? How is everybody doing? My name is Eko Simpson. If this is your first time of checking out my YouTube videos, kindly subscribe and let's build this channel together. So let me tell you something. First of all, I love it when I have to give you something culturally from Ghana. Yes, when we have to display our beautiful culture and, you know, bring in our beautiful people from outside there, talking about the African diaspora. Basically, you know, this is what my channel is all about. So first of all, I want to say a big congratulations to these brothers who came to Ghana and were crowned chiefs and queen mothers. Yes. So first of all, I want to say a big congratulations to Dr. Atlantis Browder. You are an author, a philanthropist, a historian out there in the United States. You're doing a beautiful job out there. I want to say congrats to Dr. Chike Ekua. I want to say big shout outs to you for being installed as a sub-chief here in Ghana. And I want to say a big shout out to my man, Bright Enabulele. Yes, you are the owner of this cryptocurrency called Odua Coin. You are also in Ghana. A few days ago, you were crowned as a chief here in Ghana, Maureen to be specific, and other two beautiful, awesome queen mothers that were also crowned here. So basically, like I told you, my YouTube channel is to bridge the gap between the two beautiful people, the Africans in the motherland and then the African diaspora out there. So a few days ago, something beautiful happened. And by kind courtesy of Obokese University of Excellence and Obokese Foundation, about 200 to 300 brothers and sisters from the diaspora flew all the way to Ghana, to Central region, my region, and then to Cape Coast, and then down south to Maori community. I've already showed you some beautiful videos, content from Maori community. I told you about Maori community, right? In my previous videos, you've seen me sharing more beautiful content about Maori. So Maori is a fishing community here in the Central region. It's a beautiful town. You should make it a point to come and visit. So a few months ago, we commissioned a beautiful monument to represent Ofemi Kweja. So he was the first fisherman, the celebrated fisherman here in Ghana. And he's celebrated in most of the fishing communities here in Ghana. And we also talked about his brother called Asebu Amenfi, one giant man from Ghana, yes. So this is what happened a few days ago inside Mauri, courtesy of Obokese University of Excellence and Obokese Foundation, and then UCC, University of Cape Coast. They brought about 200 to 300 African diaspora to Ghana, yes. And they came here to organize educational events, to talk to the students. They also did some artworks and all that. But at the end of the day, brothers and sisters had to be renamed. Yes, I know some of you say, drop that thing. But hey, if we are looking at connecting with our brothers, there are certain things we need to learn from each other. I wouldn't say we need to teach them, because definitely they are here to teach us as well. So there are a lot of things that we have to inculcate in ourselves so that we can get to understand where we are and how the system runs. So beautiful brothers and sisters came. It was a beautiful event inside Mauri with a lot of people in the audience looking at what was happening. It was so good having to see our brothers and sisters getting their names. Yes, getting their names. And about 200 plus had their names. They had to drop their old name, even though it may be in their document, but officially, brothers and sisters have gotten their own local names. Now, let me tell you something. In the video, you will see that certain men are holding a staff, and every staff has a meaning on it. Now, in our tradition, in the Ghanaian tradition, a group of families come together to form a clan. So we have about 7 clans in Ghana. So every community has a representative of one of these clans. And out of these clans, we all have an emblem or symbol that represents the clan. So you might find an elephant, you might find a fish, you might find 2 people sitting together, you might find someone like this. You might find different stuff with different emblems on it that represents the families here. So what happened there was that brothers and sisters were allocated to families. Now, the beautiful thing is that out of the 7 families, there were kings and queens who were installed to represent their brothers in the diaspora here in Ghana. Take a look at this video and enjoy it. And make sure that you put up a comment and you subscribe to this YouTube channel if you've not. Thank you very much for checking me out.
Connecting Africans to the diaspora, to the motherland. Travel and see Africa. Echo, see. Reflect your team and ride, yeah. Echo, see. That were provided by you to me, to them. And they have looked at your names and had spiritual people look at your name and determine what vibration is associated with that name. And all these people here are family representatives of those names. So you're not just receiving a name today, the family members that are in that family are here today to try to greet you. But of course, we know that would take to the end of the month before we could get meetings with all these people. So we've been wrestling with the idea and the challenge of how exactly to do this so that your flight won't take off without you on Friday. So here's what we have decided makes sense. We're going to call the name of a male and female for each day that will represent the other people on that same day. However, if you're so inclined, we will make available to you the actual family name that's associated with that day name. So at some point, you can make contact with them. We can change photos. They were hoping to meet with you and start talking to you right now, but that's not going to happen.
Amen. And we are home. And you never live somewhere without investing in it. So we need to invest in this place. It's set aside for us, and we are welcome here. It's important for us to give here. So
Okay, so that's it. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight for this special edition of Wisdom Wednesday. I appreciate all of your love, all of your comments. And as Atlantis said, we will record my responses to the questions that I didn't have an opportunity to answer this evening. And thank you again for tuning in. Several people have asked us about how they could watch this program again. You can go to YouTube and type in the search IKG. You'll find the IKG YouTube channel, and all of our Wisdom Wednesday programs are cataloged on our YouTube channel, and you can see them for free. I encourage you all to do so and spread the word. Let someone know what we're doing. Encourage people to participate in signing up and supporting the Asa Restoration Project. You can write off your contribution on your taxes and know that you are helping to create a new world for your children and your children's children's children. And that is how we're getting the job done. So thank you all so much. I appreciate you. Love you. Be safe. Be kind to someone. And we look forward to seeing you in the very near future. Good night, everybody. Peace.